Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to navigate for a result in Compose. So let's jump in Android Studio and I'll show you 3 ways you can do that. So here we are in Android Studio and the first way that we are going to navigate for a result is to not navigate. So I'm going to write some code and then I'll speed through it and then I'll show you and then we'll walk through it. Alright, cool. So looking at this code that I just wrote, you may be asking yourself, what is this app? Well, obviously it is a note app, and the selection that's happening here is when you start to create a note, you're going to be allowed to copy an old note as a template. And so walking you through this code, you'll see here that I just have a Boolean variable that's called showSelector, and that controls whether or not this note selector bottom sheet is shown. And this note selector bottom sheet exposes this onResult API, and all that does is once you click a note, it returns that note in this lambda. And then we take that note and we set the note template using its ID. And then we set showSelector to false so that the bottom sheet is dismissed. And if we run this, cool. So here I'm going to click Create Note, and this is the button that we're going to be using to copy an old note template. And here we have our bottom sheet, and this is our template. It's called Meals Day, and I'm going to say I'm going to record my meals for Sunday, and I'm not going to fill out the rest of it because that'd be redundant, but you can see here that I saved. So yeah, that's our first option. Our first option is just don't navigate. If you have a really simple piece of UI, and that's what you're going to be getting a result from, and you have access to that UI from your current module, then there's no real need to navigate, and so just don't. Make it easy on yourself. Cool. But what if then you want to navigate, though, or you need to navigate? So the next option is to use the save state handle that is in the backstack entry of your composable. So every destination on the backstack has one of these nav backstack entries, and if you look at it, one of the things in it is a save state handle, and you can interact with that save state handle from any other backstack item. So let's go, and we're going to create some kind of helper functions to help us have a generic way to set results and retrieve those results. So again, I'm going to write some code, and we'll talk about it after. All right, so looking at this code, you'll see that I have an extension function off of nav controller that allows you to set a result, and all it does is it looks at the previous backstack entry, so the backstack entry that would have started the navigation for a result, and it says previous backstack entry, look at that save state handle and set a result on it. And then on a nav backstack entry, I have a get result. I'm calling get result flow because that's what it actually does. And what it does is it takes in a default and it returns a state flow from the state handle of the same result. And you'll notice that I then also do a filter. And this filter says, hey, let's make sure that the nav backstack entry actually contains this result. If you don't have that, then this will trigger that flow anytime when it first comes into composition, even if the result hasn't been set yet. So like before you even launched, navigated for result, you could be getting a null result from this flow without this line. And then we call a map. And what we're doing here is we're actually removing the result from the save state handle. And that's because results are meant to be one-time events, right? They're not supposed to be persistent data. They're just supposed to, you get that result and then you act on it, right? So cool, let's see how we're going to use this. So right here we have that same note selector that we had in the last example, and it also has this onResult API. And so all we're going to do is we're going to say navController.setResult, and we're going to say note.id. And then we are also going to pop that backstack so that so once you've set the result, you go back to the last screen that actually called for the result. Cool. And then we're going to go back to the note screen, and what we're actually going to do is now we're going to need access from where we have access to the backstack entry. We need access also to the view model. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say launched effect, so unit, because we just want this to fire off on the first composition. And what we're going to say is backstack dot save state handle. Actually, no, we don't need to do that. We just say get result flow. And the default we're going to say is null. So we have to give it a type. Oops. And then we're going to collect. And on that collection, we're going to take this, what we got back is the ID, and we're going to take that ID and ignore it if it's null, and we're going to pass that on to the view model to set that template. Right, so if you look back, all that we've had to do here is write a couple of really short helper functions and then set the result on the result composable, and then in the receiving composable, we are getting a result flow, collecting it, and sending that data to our view model. So let's build again. So let's create a note, call that, and we'll scroll. And this one will be, I don't know, Saturday. So you can see that pops up there. Cool, Saturday. And so what you might have noticed there is that in this one, we no longer have that bottom sheet, and that's because we actually had to do navigation, which means we leave our current composition and go to a different one. So that UI does not exist behind it. So we can't do a bottom sheet like we did with the last one. So now let's look at a different option. The last option we're going to look at is using an activity and an activity result contract. So in this version, we have that same bottom sheet composable, and all that is happening here is it is wrapped in an activity. And this activity is transparent, but it doesn't have to be. But I wanted it to be transparent so that we could show this bottom sheet and have the old UI behind it. So what you're going to do first is wrap that composable in an activity, and then you're going to have to write a contract. So I'll go ahead and write that activity result contract, and we'll talk about it when I'm done. All right, so looking at what I wrote here, so like I said, it's an activity result contract. You'll see that this is nullable unit, and that's because this is the type of any input that you might want to pass to this contract, and because we don't really need to pass any input, we don't. If you wanted to, you could say, in a different example, you might, like say this is an image selector, and you want to be able to select multiple images. You could input, you could pass an int that represents the max number of images that you want to select. But here, it doesn't matter, so it's just nullable unit. And the return type is long, and it's nullable because if we didn't set the result, or if the result is canceled, then we want null. Otherwise, we want the long, which is what the IDs are. So then we'll see how we use that here. And all we do here is we're in an activity, so we can set result, and we say result OK, and then we get a note from the oh, oops. What you gotta do is intent dot put extra, and it's going to be note ID, and it is it dot ID. And then you're also going to want to finish the activity, because once you set that result, you typically want to plot back to what you were doing last. So yeah, all we're doing here is we get the note from this result, and we set its ID as the result, and we pop. Cool. And then how do we use that? Well, we go back here, and it will be pretty much the same concept as from here, except instead of this launched effect, now we're going to create an activity result launcher using the remember activity launcher for activity result. There you go. The contract is going to be that contract that you just wrote. Selector, and now that you have that contract in there, you can, this onResult lambda knows the type, right? And so we know that this is an ID, and so we'll do pretty much the exact same thing that we did when we used the onResult, set result, get result, flow extension functions that we created, but we're just going to pass this on up to the view model that we have. And let's spell launcher correctly, because that's usually important. And then instead of passing this on up the chain to the navigation level stuff, we're just going to call launcher.launch. And this null again is just any input. So like I said, the input for this one is a nullable unit type because we don't need input, but it could be something else like an int or whatever. Oops. And so now let's launch that. So same thing, it's going to pop up. We have all of our notes here. We can select that, it pops off, and we'll say meals for Friday, and we can save it, and it'll show up just like all of the other ones. And so there you have it. There's 3 ways that you can navigate for result in Jetpack Compose. If you want to take a look at all of this code, I have all of it on GitHub. There's a link in the description, and it's in all of the different stages, laid out really nicely in different branches for you. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.